The year 2025 marked a dramatic intensification of the US-China trade war, which had been simmering since 2018. The second Trump administration adopted a more aggressive stance, leveraging national security-related acts to impose tariffs more rapidly and broadly than in its first term. This triggered a cycle of retaliation from Beijing, leading to a state of high-stakes economic confrontation. September 29, the U.S. Commerce Department issues an affiliates rule, expanding export controls to foreign companies 50% owned by entities on U.S. blacklists, directly impacting Chinese firms. October 9, China announces its strictest ever export controls on rare earth elements and related technologies, set to take effect November 8. October 10, in retaliation, President Trump threatens to impose an additional 100% tariff on all Chinese imports and new export controls on critical software. October 14, the U.S. and China begin imposing reciprocal fees on each other's ships docking at their ports. October 17, President Trump softens his tone, calling the 100% tariff threat not sustainable and confirming a planned meeting with President Xi Jinping. November 5, the U.S. Supreme Court is scheduled to hear oral arguments on the legality of the President's use of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act (EPA) to impose tariffs. The 2025 conflict is being fought on multiple economic fronts, with tariffs as the primary weapon, supplemented by strategic export controls designed to cripple key industries. The tariff barrage, the tariff rates imposed in 2025 are historically high, representing a shift from a rules-based trading system to one governed by power and economic coercion. The Trump administration's measures have lifted the average U.S. tariff from under 2.5% at the start of the year to over 18%. The conflict has seen tariff threats and implementations swing wildly, creating massive uncertainty for global businesses. All Chinese imports, with specific high rates on EVs, solar panels, steel, and aluminum. China retaliatory tariffs have reached as high as 125%. U.S. goods, with a particular focus on agricultural products like soybeans and other key exports. China's most potent countermeasure has been the weaponization of its dominance in the rare earth elements RES market. China accounts for approximately 70% of global remining and over 90% of refining and processing, giving it a near monopoly on materials essential for modern technology and defense. The export controls, announced in October 2025, are Beijing's most assertive move yet. The new rules require any company exporting products containing over 0.1% Chinese-sourced rare earths or manufactured using Chinese processing technology to obtain a license from Beijing. This is effectively China's version of the foreign direct product rule used by the U.S. to control semiconductor technology. These controls directly threaten U.S. production of defense systems. RES are critical for precision-guided missiles, F-35 fighter jets, and radar systems. Clean energy, high-performance magnets made from RES are essential for electric vehicle EV motors and wind turbines. Consumer electronics. Virtually all advanced electronics rely on components containing RES. This move is seen as a direct response to U.S. efforts to stifle China's tech sector and gives Beijing significant leverage in negotiations. The technology front. The trade war is fundamentally a technology war. The U.S. has implemented unprecedented export controls aimed at restricting China's access to advanced technology, particularly in semiconductors, fearing it will be used to bolster China's military. These measures include semiconductor controls. The U.S. has restricted Beijing's ability to obtain advanced chips, such as those from NVIDIA, and has pressured allies to do the same. This has extended to controlling foreign-made chips produced with U.S. technology or equipment. Software restrictions. The U.S. has threatened to impose export controls on critical software, which could include electrical design automation EDA tools and AI frameworks, crippling China's ability to design its own advanced chips. However, these restrictions have had the dual effect of accelerating China's drive for technological self-reliance. In January 2025, Chinese startup DeepSeek launched a highly advanced AI model, demonstrating that U.S. pressure is spurring domestic innovation. The conflict between the world's two largest economies is sending shockwaves through the global system. disrupting trade flows, hurting specific industries, and slowing overall economic growth. Disrupted supply chains and trade diversion. The tariffs have rendered many established supply chains untenable, forcing a global reallocation of manufacturing and trade. Circumvention. Many Chinese manufacturers have shifted final assembly to countries in Southeast Asia, such as Vietnam, Malaysia, and Thailand, to evade U.S. tariffs. The finished goods are then exported to the U.S. from these third countries. China Plus One strategy. U.S. and other international firms are increasingly adopting a China Plus One strategy, where they maintain their core operations in China to retain cost advantages while building parallel supply chains in other countries like India or Mexico to mitigate risk. Bystander effects. The trade war has created opportunities for bystander countries. Brazil has captured the soybean market in China that was once dominated by the U.S. Other countries have seen increased exports of products subject to U.S.-China tariffs to the rest of the world. Sector-specific impacts. Agriculture and clean energy. Certain sectors have been caught directly in the crossfire. U.S. agriculture. American farmers have been among the hardest hit. China, once the largest buyer of U.S. soybeans, has all but halted purchases in retaliation for U.S. tariffs. This has caused crop prices to collapse, created a supply glut, and pushed many farmers to the brink of financial ruin. U.S. agricultural exports to China fell by 53% in the first 7 months of 2025 alone. Clean energy. The trade war threatens China's energy transition and the global green technology market. While the U.S. has imposed heavy tariffs on Chinese-made EVs and solar panels, China's dominance in the supply chain for these products, including its control over critical minerals and battery production, creates a structural dependency for the rest of the world. The aggregate impact of the trade war is a drag on the global economy. WTO has warned that a full decoupling of the U.S. and Chinese economies could reduce global GDP by up to 7% in the long term. Even the current level of tariffs is forecast to cause a 0.2% loss in global merchandise trade. The International Monetary Fund (IMF) has lowered its global growth forecasts for 2025 and 2026, citing the uncertainty and disruption caused by the tariffs. For American consumers, the tariffs are a direct tax. Estimates suggest the tariffs will cost the average U.S. household nearly $1,300 in 2025, and global businesses face over $1.2 trillion in tariff-related costs. The 2025 trade war is a symptom of a deeper structural transformation of the world order, with significant geopolitical and diplomatic implications. The battle of narratives. Both nations have engaged in a robust narrative war to justify their actions on the world stage and to their domestic populations. United States. The U.S. frames the conflict as a necessary response to decades of unfair Chinese trade practices, including intellectual property theft, state subsidies, forced technology transfer, and national security threats. The approach is explicitly power-based, aiming to rebalance trade through coercive measures. China. Beijing portrays the U.S. as a hegemonic power aiming to stifle China's rightful economic rise. It presents itself as a champion of the multilateral trading system, even as it employs its own protectionist measures. Domestically, the government invokes the century of humiliation narrative to foster a sense of nationalistic pride and a willingness to endure economic hardship to resist foreign pressure. A world forced to choose the escalating conflict is pressuring other nations to take sides, straining alliances and fragmenting the global economy. The European Union, the UK, Canada, Mexico, and India have all been hit with U.S. tariffs, catching them in the crossfire and forcing them to reevaluate their own trade policies. This dynamic could accelerate a shift away from globalization toward a world of competing regional trade blocs. The trade war is also shaped by domestic political and legal factors in both countries. The legal battle over tariffs, a significant point of vulnerability for the Trump administration's tariff strategy, is its legal foundation. The administration has heavily relied on the International Emergency Economic Powers Act (EPA) to bypass normal legislative processes and impose tariffs quickly. However, the legality of using this authority for broad trade disputes has been challenged in U.S. courts. The Supreme Court is set to hear arguments in the case in November 2025, and a ruling against the administration could strip the president of his most potent trade weapon, a possibility Beijing is likely watching closely. Public sentiment and political maneuvering in China. The government maintains tight control over the public discourse. Online commentary about the negative economic impacts of the trade war is heavily censored on platforms like Weibo, while nationalistic anti-US sentiment is encouraged. In the US, the trade war is a key political issue. China's retaliatory tariffs have been shown to systematically target goods produced in Republican-leaning counties, suggesting a strategy to inflict political pain. The conflict's outcome will have profound implications for the domestic standing of leaders in both nations.